listening to Into the Spotlight with Osaka Jack on Everfree Network. Hello everyone, this is Osaka Jack with Into the Spotlight on Everfree Network. With me today, I have someone that you may have seen vending in a few cons. You might not know them, and I'll try not to judge you personally on that. But, Fontfolly, hello!
Hello!
How are you doing today?
Pretty good.
Good, very nice. Well, if anybody is not familiar with you or your works, could you give a quick rundown? What do you do? Not exclusively to the fandom, if you'd prefer.
Yeah. Well, with on the pony fandom, my husband and I make buttons, and we sell blind bag ponies and many, many other strange things. Some of them not very closely aligned. We just sort of showed up with a bunch of stuff, including a science fiction project that I edit, and various toys. And my co-vendor at least two of the cons has been a guy who doesn't do pony stuff at all, but he shows up with lots of Disney cloison pins. He collects that, and he has just tons of them. So anyway, so that's kind of what I do on the pony side. On the general fandom side, like I do a science fiction fanzine that I've been editing for. I've been the editor for, it will be 20 years next year. Oh God.
I apologize for being the one to bring that to light.
and I was one of the founding members.
But the 20th years.
No, I just hadn't realized that my anniversary was getting that big as well. And I started as one of the founding members of this particular science fiction project before I became the editor. So the project's been going on for many years longer than that.
Sure.
It's called the Taipan Literary and Arts Project. It's a anthropomorphic science fiction shared universe thing.
And,
do that.
I need to mention this because I made this mistake. Despite your name being Fontfolly, it's not type handler like TYPE. No, it's Tai, TAI-PAN, Taipan.
Yes.
I honestly thought you said type handler. I'm like, oh, cool. That's awesome name.
That would have been cool, since I am, a little bit obsessed with fonts, hence the Fontfolly name.
Can you explain that? What was the etymology behind this choice of a screen name?
One of the big... sorry, I get tongue-tied. For a long time, I've used a whole bunch of screen names because I've been on online fandom for forever. Sure. I was really, really happy some years ago when... on LiveJournal, when Typographer came up as being somebody else had that as a name, and it had become abandoned. You could buy abandoned names, and I switched to that, and because that was one of the things I do or have done in my professional life. And when I got onto Twitter, well, Typographer was already taken by somebody else.
Sure.
And several other variants I thought of it. So I was trying to go, but I was also thinking, I'm trying to get something a little bit more silly.
Okay.
So I just kept kind of going with what's various things that I can say about type and or fonts that are capture the fact that I'm not always terribly serious about anything. And it just eventually, one of the things was Fontfolly. That's nice, and alliteration and silly, and so that's the etymology.
Okay, all right. So. What about the font obsession?
That one's harder to explain. Well, not really harder to explain. I started typing when I was 10.
Okay.
And it's a silly story. My mom is the second of 8 children.
Ooh, wow.
And one of her brothers her youngest brother is only a few years older than me. But one of her middle brothers conned her into type. This was back in the day when this typing was a big deal, and not everybody knew how to do it, and nobody had personal computers.
Right.
She agreed to type his term paper.
Yes.
And it turned out to be, of course, a much bigger hassle than she thought it would be.
Sure.
And once it was
Now,
done,
for everybody who's listening, for those who don't recall, term papers are really long. 30
yes,
pages, 40 pages. Now, you imagine writing a term paper where one spelling error means you have to retype that page and every following page to make sure that it matches up.
yep.
I want you to have envisioned this and then go back to your spell checkers on Twitter, because that's better.
Yes. Yes, yeah, no spell checking and no copy and paste was not. Yeah, so when that project was over, she one day just sat me down in front of the typewriter and said, "I'm not doing that for you when you're old enough for that to be a thing. You're going to learn how to operate this thing yourself." And since I'd wanted to be a writer since I was 6, that just sort of all fell together, and pretty soon I was typing like crazy and typing everything. This gets into one of the other weirdnesses. I don't know how to write longhand.
Okay.
Not saying this quite right. I got as far that we were right at the point where at school they were having you do loops.
Okay.
To learn how to do an even round loop when I started learning how to type. And so
I see.
I started turning in the assignments there in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade where they would say, you need to bring it in, which is another thing we used to do back in the dark ages when I was a child.
Yep.
You need to turn in, it needs to be this many pages and a handwritten, but it has to be in, as they used to call it, in cursive writing.
Yes,
joined up,
cursive.
as they say. And I would bring it in typed. And once the teachers were convinced that I actually was typing it myself, they were okay with that. What that means is I never really learned how to.
I actually had a teacher in 8th grade, and by mid-6th grade, it was obvious to me and everybody else that my cursive, while I could do it, was really hard to read, and I just wasn't getting better with enough practice. So I switched to print if I had to write it, or like type it. I had a teacher it was 10th grade. 10th grade teacher who insisted that everybody must write cursive because it was faster. I debated him, but I could not convince him otherwise, so I turned in papers in cursive, and they would get back to me, I can't read this. And I'd be like, I know. But,
Yep.
yeah.
So, so I became fascinated with, everything to do with typing and typesetting and book publishing. I had been already leaning that way anyhow in there. And then in high school, when I got into journalism, back then, again, we weren't doing this on computers.
Yeah.
We would type up our stories on typewriters and send them off to a typesetter we would get back 2 days later these long strips of 1 column wide text that all of our stories had been converted to, and you'd have to write 2 or 3 alternate headlines when you sent your story in to get those typeset as well. That whole thing about fonts and that version of fonts got me quite fascinated. And then, of course, computers come along and we start being able to typeset on computers, and I just got even more into, oh my God, I have more than 3 choices. I have hundreds, and I went through the phase that everybody does of, everybody who gets into it at all, into any sort of desktop publishing, of collecting all the fonts you can and using them no matter how horrible they look because they're cool,
Right. Tell me how often you used dingbats.
Now I have several dingbat fonts that I use for certain things, but yeah.
Yep.
But then once I got out of school and into tech writing and working in that kind of for real, it just continued. I had to I had to design books because the software companies I worked for were all so small they didn't they would hire one person to do their everything, to do the writing and editing and designing, and
Sure.
I just sort of taught myself design for a while until I eventually decided I should go learn this for real. And so that's what I really am. I love letter forms. I love looking at fonts. I am still a bit of that. I am definitely a font hoarder. I buy my own fonts now, so that's, it's no longer. If I can only find a free version of something, I will use it. But I tend to buy fonts, and I have tons and tons of them. Way too many.
I've mentioned this before on Twitter, and this might make you angry, but
Oh,
although I try to avoid it as much as possible, there is one shining reason to use Comic Sans.
yes.
Lowercase a. If you're in a foreign country teaching 6-year-old kids how to write the alphabet, when you teach them how to write the letter A, the lowercase a in almost every other font doesn't match what they just wrote down. The lowercase a that we use in most things looks like an upside down G. An upside down smaller G.
Oh.
And that's not how we write a lowercase a if we're writing it. And we're teaching them how to write it. But in Comic Sans...
That's not how you write a lowercase a.
Okay, granted.
Sorry, I'm a freak. I do that.
I understand. But no, yeah, the official English teaching for Japanese language, lowercase a looks like how it would look if you typed it in Comic Sans.
Yeah.
So when we're writing things for my students, Comic Sans is one of the fonts that I don't like to use it, but it is one that's easily recognized by the kids for every letter. Yep. Well, and I know I'm going to get comments saying this one has a 2 and this one has a 2 and this one has. Yes, there are others, but not as readily available.
That's the important thing. It has to be one that you can get on everybody's machine.
Yeah. And a lot of word processing programs here don't have a lot of English fonts because why? But they do have Comic Sans.
Yes. Yep.
So yeah, that is a reason that it should survive.
I am more of a font slut than I am of a font snob. So I do when somebody does something that's a professional, thing, and they do it in Comic Sans, and it's not something that's supposed to be informal or something. I do frown at that, but I'm not one of the people who just think it's a horrible, awful thing that you should never touch. And it's like one font that when I do design, do software manual design, there's one font I use all the time, and it's one that's it doesn't have anywhere near the reputation Comic Sans does. It's Franklin Gothic Medium.
Okay.
And Franklin Gothic Medium, but in designers on the West Coast, particularly, it has a teeny bit of a bad rep because it was for a time, I should say, it is no longer, it was for a time the official font for headlines in Microsoft manuals. And so people didn't want, and it's like, my thing is, most readers don't notice things like that from one company to the next.
Yes,
but
that's true.
Reason why I love Franklin Gothic Medium for software manuals or for any sort of technical manual is the one, the simple, the letter, the number 1.
Yes.
Looks like it can never be confused with an L or an I. It looks like that schoolroom, that old one with the slab at the bottom and the little pearl at the front.
I see what you mean, yeah.
And it's just, technical manuals always have, at some point you have some numbered steps.
Yes. And granted, I don't think anybody would say, what? Step L? I don't understand. But if there are numbers somewhere in there.
Particularly where the page breaks happen, it doesn't always, and it's more of a, for me, that it is so obviously a number 1 and kind of a formal looking number 1 that, it just pops out step 1,
Right.
So, that's one. And one reason I pick it is because for a long time, Franklin Gothic was the headline font in Microsoft manuals. Franklin Gothic is one of those fonts that's on just about every computer.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I don't have to worry about whether the people I'm working for have bought that font. They almost always have it.
That's good. Yes, I mean, it's rare that I work with them, but yeah, when we were working on my show titles, my artist said, "Oh, try this one," and he sent me something, and I'm like, "I don't see anything." Oh, you have to download this font. Okay, let's download this font, and then let's see how it looks. Oh, it looks good, yes, but the extra effort really wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Need to find a way to embed those if you can when you're doing that sort of thing. Yes. So, yeah, so
I,
that's, yeah.
I'm not fantastic at Japanese, but I have gotten to the point where I can recognize a bad Japanese font.
Oh, I'm nowhere near that.
I can't.
I can
Couldn't
barely
tell you
tell
the
what
name
font
off
it
the top
is.
of my head, but occasionally I'll look at one and go, "Oh, no, that looks bad. No, that's bad."
Yeah. Yeah, see, fonts are bad in my opinion, if they're not readable.
That's the main thing. Yes.
And so or if they call enough attention to themselves that
it takes you out of reading them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was an example of a bad font, choice. One time, this was right after the dot bomb crash.
Okay.
Which was that 2001 ish? I don't remember.
Then, yeah.
Um,
Early aughts.
A friend of mine contacted me and said, my so and so's kid just got laid off at wherever he is, and he's trying to get jobs in graphic design. Could you take a look at his portfolio and give him some pointers?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the pieces he had in the portfolio was a Star Trek fan club newsletter that he did.
Okay.
Now, visualize if you can the font that was used for the lead titles of The Search for Spock, which is a font that is used in a lot of Star Trek properties.
Sure.
He used that font for the body text of the newsletter.
Oh.
And it was laid out in 4 columns on a normal 8.5 by 11 piece of paper.
4?
And 4 columns, yes, 4 columns. And
there are
it's
not many fonts that would be legible at 4 columns on one piece of paper.
No, and it's a font that doesn't have lowercase, so it's got, small caps for your lowercase, and because they had it's the letter spacing is wider than normal in that, because the font was designed for titles on a movie poster originally. It's not so in order to make it fit and make all the text fit in the file, he had adjusted the leading between the lines of type so that the tops of the ascenders of the tall letters were running into the bottom of the descenders in the line above.
This person was looking for a design job?
Yes, it was like and he puts a fan project in his portfolio, and it was the most illegible thing I had ever seen.
Wow. I remember when things were first starting to appear online readily. There was a psychology textbook that had decided that it was going to put its content online, and which was great because a lot of things, like for example, visual illusions. Sometimes people looking at a picture just don't get it, but if you can actually have it on the screen and have it move in front of them, they can see it. But yeah, the body of the text was just it was horrible. It was an absolutely horrible. I cannot remember the name of it, and I'm sorry about that. But it was a text that was just so hard to read, and it looked good for a few words, and then you're like, I can't read any of this.
Yes.
And it just ruined the entire thing. And they at the time they were wondering why people didn't go for their online book, and they showed like a picture of it, and like 50 hands went up and said, "We got an idea. We know why."
Yep. Not readable.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, something that I know we talked about a little bit beforehand. You've got a lot of blind bags.
Yes.
And you mentioned that you do sell
those
at the cons too.
Yeah, that was one of our our big sellers at a couple of the cons were the old blind bags. My husband and I both bought lots of blind bags. We bought whole boxes, and we would both buy them. Part of this is because we have different philosophies about them. He would open the box and just open bag after bag after bag, all in a setting. I would buy the same box, the same set, box of my own, and I would. Day one, I would pick up a bag and I would open one pony. Oh, that's what I got, and I would, and I was doing one pony a day, and so that was part of it. Was we had these what am I going to get next? And he's like, I want them all. And
I frankly agree with both of you. Well, no, I can explain this because it's so difficult for me to get them that if I do order a box, it's like, well, that's the pony budget for 3 months right there in this box, and I want to just rip them all open and put them on display and have fun, but that would be it. 10 minutes of happiness for 3 months, so I'm going to force myself to only open them when I've had a bad day. Okay.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well, and I was about to mention also, a friend of ours that when I was explaining this, she laughed and told us her husband had bought a box of blind bag ponies. And I didn't know that he was into ponies. I should have known because he has fun, fanish things. But he was doing that. He saved them every now and then. He had a bad day and he needed a pony moment.
Yep.
So,
helps more than a drink, I gotta say.
So we just bought lots of them and opened them, and we had tons of them laying around the house. And we decided we actually did it 2 years. We decided our theme for the Christmas tree that year was ponies. And we had the Celestia, one of the Celestias that was made by Joy.
Okay, right.
Joy the artist, at her Etsy store.
Sure.
And we also had we have a couple of Lunas that she did, and so we made since the ragdoll Celestia was big and white with velvet wings and all this. It's very, was very top of Christmas tree. Sure-ish. As soon as we thought of it, so she was the top of the Christmas tree, and I made a wreath. I always make a wreath for both the inside and the outside of the door.
Oh, nice.
And I made the one for the inside. I put one of the Lunas on that. But we had the hundreds of the little blind bag ponies because they fit just perfectly on an artificial evergreen branch. They don't need anything else. You can just plop them on there with their legs as they're standing on the branch. And it was
thinking right now, some of the opaque or clear blind bag ponies, you could put those right on top of one of the Christmas lights.
Yes, we had a bunch of the crystal ones, and that's what we did. As we put them in front. I would try to find a light that was a nice bright color that would work well with it to put them in front of. Yep. And that was we did that just ponies one year, and the next year we try not to do exactly the same theme every Christmas. And so the next year we also, once we had done the ponies, the next I think Everfree Northwest was the next PonyCon we went to after that year. We went through and we pulled all the ponies that we could part with out of the blind bag, which was a lot of them because we only after you have a few hundred of them around the house, it's like, well, we don't need all of them.
Right.
And we were selling those at the table, so you could either buy, I bought a couple of boxes just before the con of I had one older box that had been out of print for a while, as it were, and then a couple of newer ones. And you could buy a blind bag, or you could, for cheaper, just pick the pony you wanted.
Sure.
Out of whatever we had in the bins.
Right.
So we had quite a bit fewer, although we both, of course, acquired another set or two of blind bag ponies over the course of the year. But we had quite a bit fewer, and like I said, we don't do the same theme every year. So the next year we did cartoon animals.
Okay.
I have a lot of Warner Brothers ornaments and a lot of Disney ornaments. And so we had a bunch of the blind bag ponies and a few of the special set ponies and so forth, and then Bugs Bunny and
Right.
Mickey Mouse and
Sure.
all sorts of other things on the tree. So that
Uh,
was fun, and we still continue to buy boxes of blind bag ponies. But we're gonna have a sale again pretty soon, I think. But
when last year when they had ponies in the Crane Games here, they had two sizes, 10 centimeters and 7 centimeters. They've been compared. Casey refers to them as Fraggle ponies because the face is a little bit off. It looks like a Fraggle more than a pony, but they were still cute. But the smaller ones actually had a nylon stretchy loop on their back, and they were designed to fit on the end of a cell phone, which is fine. But frankly, those things are perfect tree ornaments.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they could hang from instead of standing on the little branch, so you could hang from the branch.
Yep.
Yeah.
And back when I had them, Christmas time, I tried to sell them as, hey, Christmas ornaments. And some people bought them, and I have a set for keeping on the tree, which is nice. But
yeah, that's good. That works.
I was actually shocked. I'm not sure 100% that these fall under the blind bag title, but the character collection sets.
Yes.
Okay. I was shocked to find them in a local store the other day.
Oh wow.
And yeah, I wasn't aware that they exported these.
No.
So now I have the Thunder Lane, Rainbow-Eyed Fluttershy, and no name but a muffin near the cross-eyed gray Pegasus.
Aha. Cool.
As well as the villain set.
We buy those sets too.
I also got... They had the villain set with Stephen Magnet and Nightmare Moon. And the Manticore. I was shocked.
I think we just got that one ourselves. I believe. I don't know where the ones we bought recently were. I thought that was one of them.
Mm-hmm. But I was shocked to find them in Japan. They're never in Japan.
Yeah. That's cool. I'm glad you found them.
Yes, I'm very happy. Yay, I got a Derpy. An official Derpy.
Woohoo.
Not a lot of those.
Yeah.
Or not enough, I should say.
Yes. So I'll go with that. As well.
Which of the conventions that you've been to have been the most festive for you? Because I know that I saw you at Everfree Northwest, but we didn't really know each other at that point.
Festive. That's a... I think I
think it's the Christmas discussion that got me into that word.
Yeah,
but
no, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I think I would put that word most on the not this year's Everfree, nothing to do with the con really, but the previous years was because that was a nice confluence of a bunch of people that I had only met online were there. And most of our local Brony friends were also there, and I had the table. It was just a nice combination of things. I had a couple of different sets of parents who didn't know I was into ponies show up at my table with their kids that were people I knew from other walks of life, and that was fun. So it was that one was just a lot of that. That Everfree was a lot of fun.
So wait, the parents knew you but didn't know that you were into ponies?
Yeah.
I'm curious where they knew you from, if you can, or just...
Two sets were people I knew from, I've been in science fiction fandom in general for a gazillion years. And so they were just people I knew from sci-fi fandom who were not also... A lot of my sci-fi fandom friends that are also into bronies were also into furry or anthropomorphics in one way or another before bronies.
I see.
So they knew, but these were both sets were folks who were not into anthropomorphics or funny animals or that sort of thing. And in one case, it was they were there with their kid. And that was why they were there. The other one was someone who I knew them from college.
Oh, okay.
And had, it had only it was of the two parents they had in the time between when I used to hang out with them
Mm-hmm.
frequently. The parents had divorced, and so one of the parents knew I was, and is himself a Brony, knew knew I was into ponies. His wife didn't know, and she was there with the kid on one day at the con, and
Mm-hmm.
comes up. She's looking at me, and I could tell, you could see the expression that she's trying to figure, do I know you? And then her 6-year-old says, Gene, do you have any more of it? Because she, her kid too had met me the day before at the con.
Right,
The
right.
day before, she'd been there with her dad, who knew, they weren't the surprise, but the mother was the,
Ah.
oh, Gene, God, I haven't seen, yeah, that's right. We, haven't seen each other in years. So,
That's nice.
yeah.
It's good that it can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we talked about it a little bit, but the Taipan.
Yes.
Not Taipan, the Taipan.
Yes.
What does this entail? Is this a annual or monthly or every third day?
um, it's right now. If you go by our most recent publishing schedule, we're about to hit 2 years since the last issue came
Okay.
out. We've had a long slog getting this last issue out. For many years, many years, we had a schedule of 3 issues a year,
Mm-hmm.
and which for a fanish project, and it worked out pretty well. It's like I said, it's a shared universe project. So we have people writing science fiction stories in this universe that we all designed together,
Mm-hmm.
and we get the stories illustrated by other members of the project. Will illustrate them. So once the story gets through an editing process and is ready to go, then we pick. We ask folks who are available who wants to do this, and
Mm-hmm.
do that, and then we publish them. So it takes it. There's a process of getting the stories done and so forth.
Right.
So it used to be 3 times a year, and like I said, we stuck to that actually for a large number of years.
Mm.
It's become, there's several things. It's very old school because it's printed on paper,
Oh, wow.
and it's
Paper? I don't
paper.
understand.
Uh-huh. And the interior is black and white. Um, and a lot of artists a lot of fan artists don't really want to do black and white anymore. There's no reason before since all fanzines tended to be published that way,
Mm-hmm.
and that was where you would get published as a fan.
Sure.
Of course you did pencils and you inked them, and that was
Right.
great. And so it's people are less excited about making material for it, and it just with our small subscriber base, it doesn't really pencil out to do color interiors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's been our bottleneck the last year and a half, is getting enough illustrations together to get the stories out.
Sure.
There's a couple of other things. When you've been publishing something like that for a long time, and it is a single universe with a single continuity,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes harder for it. It's not impossible, because the universe is so big.
They usually tend to be, yes.
Yes, the fictional universe has enough space that usually new people have been able to. I've usually been able to acclimate folks to the point where they get it. If it'll be a little overwhelming at first, but then they realize, oh, I could just write about these 3 characters over here, and I don't have to worry about any of the rest of that.
Yep.
And if that's what you want to do, you can.
Mm-hmm.
But it still is a bit intimidating when there's this backlog of stuff to try to assimilate enough to figure out what you want to write.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're one of the people, if you're a crazy person like me who always writes stories that are cast of thousands, you want to get a handle on a big bunch of them. So that's our other thing, is just that we have several things. We're very old school, so the number of people who are interested in what we're doing has shrunk, and it just takes longer to get going.
Sure.
I still think it's fun. The other restriction I haven't explained that is there, because it is a shared universe and it was created by a whole bunch of people back in the late 80s, early 90s. We have this agreement that each contributor signs and agrees to when they become a contributor, that that we can reprint the old issues with their material in it after they go, as long as we're reprinting them as originally published.
Okay.
And we have so far interpreted that to mean that we can't convert the old stuff to online.
I see.
It needs to still be, a lawyer might disagree with us, but I don't want to get into a point where anybody's suing us.
No, I understand that. Yeah.
Fans who have gone on. So that's our other thing. We've been, because the old fanzines, people don't find those very appealing. On other ways, we've been working on this side project. We published one omnibus that was all of the text and art and so forth of the first 3 issues, put together, recopy edited again, clean up the artwork a little bit. We also found some old art and stuff that had never been published from that era, and including one comic story.
Oh, nice.
From a contributor who there was a miscommunication thing, and it was very, when he found out we were still publishing, he said, "You guys ought to publish that someday." And we got that right about the time we were editing together. Well, why don't we instead of putting it in the issue, let's put it in an omnibus from back when you were a contributor.
Right.
And so we're working the second omnibus will be coming out this year.
Oh, okay.
And that will be issues 4 through 6. And those give, that gives you a nice trade paperback book that is easier for new folks to buy. And I can read this whole thing, and
right.
Instead of a pile of 6 flimsy fanzines,
Huh. When do you recall exactly when did it start?
Yes, I know that very, very well. We founded the project at about 2 a.m. at Denny's, the 3rd day of Norwestcon 1988.
Okay.
So I would have to go back and look up and see if that.
I think 2 a.m. Denny's is the site of the most genius and the most terrible ideas ever in existence.
It frequently is. I think that
Nothing
that
in
was
between.
on 11. I don't remember for sure, but we were a gang of us that tended to hang out at the con together back then. Most of us then, our common thing, we were all an ElfQuest fandom.
Okay.
There were several of us who were all members of multiple fanzines and wrote stories about each other's characters. And a few members of the group were publishers of said fanzines. And just one of those things, when we went to the con, there would be one night when after the masquerade or something, we'd all load up in however many cars we had, and we would troop off to a Denny's and set it, get a big table and sit all night, talking and chatting and sketching and writing bad poetry and, other things. And we were discussing one of the people, Whitney Ware, was the publisher of one of the other ElfQuest fanzines that I was in and was there, and she was talking about the problem she had been running into frequently of people getting irritated, other fans saying, "You can't write this because it doesn't match my understanding of canon." That's what it basically came down to.
I've heard that quite a lot.
Yes. And so we were chatting about that and the other thing, and the fact that several of us, a few of us had been published in non-fanish publications, and several more of the group wanted to do that. And so we've been talking about, the stigma of publishing in fanish stuff and not, but also the difficulty of dealing with somebody else's universe. And Whitney suddenly said, "Yeah, we should make our own universe." And by the time we got back to the hotel at 5 a.m., we had a story plotted, a story that was ultimately published in issue number 2, which is available in the omnibus that we have published, called New Queensland Station, which was written by myself and Whitney and Keith Johnson, another member of the project. And it was kind of, in a sense, sort of the origin story of what we thought of as our central crew.
Gotcha.
And several of us had characters designed and so forth, and we started writing to. This was back when we were all in ElfQuest fandom, and it was not mostly conducted on the internet. It was mostly conducted by U.S. Postal, and we all started writing to our friends in other projects that we thought might be interested in, that we thought were would be interested in joining and would be good contributors. And it just sort of went from there.
That's nice. So yeah, lesson to be taken from this, guys. People complaining that that the actual canon doesn't match their head canon. Not a new thing.
Not a new thing at all.
No, not at all.
Oh no. Oh no. I have to go on a completely when the new Star Trek movie, not the most recent one, but the first reboot.
Jar Jar?
The one before.
Oh, okay.
The actual reboot came out. One of my friends from back then, who never got involved in Taipan, but we had met in ElfQuest fandom, and she kind of considered it and decided to keep going with choices. But the day after I went and saw the new Star Trek, it was really fun to log on to the internet and find a post from her where she's going, "Finally, all of my Spock Uhura fanfic from the 70s is canon."
I'd like to thank you for not taking the bait at my little jab there, too.
Oh.
Attempting to mix Star Wars and Star Trek by saying Jar Jar. But anyway.
Oh, I thought you were saying Into Darkness. Sorry.
No, I said Jar Jar.
So I just misheard. So it wasn't me smart enough to not take the bait. I just misheard.
Okay. I actually do love both series, and I find it so hilarious if you find somebody who's overly passionate about one and just mix up their universes.
Yes.
Why didn't Picard just use his lightsaber? No! Sorry.
I want to see Picard with a lightsaber, though.
I know. Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to see Luke, some character from the actual Star Wars, just pushing the top left of his chest. Han, are you there? Into a communicator. But no, that's okay.
Nope.
I think for me, one of the most interesting things in science fiction is reading old science fiction and just seeing not what they were correct about, but what they couldn't imagine would change.
Yes.
One of my favorite, I don't know, it's not fantastic, but I thought it was pretty good at the time. It's a book called The Stainless Steel Rat.
Mm-hmm.
And that
is fantastic. I disagree with you. It's fantastic.
Really? Okay. I thought it was pretty good, but I didn't think it was like, drop down, I'm going to write fiction. I'm going to write my own stories about this. But one thing that I did like about it was that he was imagining micro grenades and itty things, but could not imagine a world run by women where they would not still be feminine and unable to control themselves when a dangerous situation arose.
Yes, that's true.
A planet run by women? Yes. Them not turning into squealish little girls when a dangerous situation occurs? Nope. Can't imagine it.
Yes. Yep. That's as soon as you mentioned old science fiction and the stuff they can't imagine, my example that's very similar to that is Slan. And I suddenly have forgotten who wrote that. And it was, damn, I can't think of it. I'll have to look it up. Slan was one of these books that I had heard about in my early days of fandom because it was published in the 50s. A.E. Van Vogt, of course.
Okay.
It was published in 1946. It wasn't in the 50s. I thought it was. So it was 1940s. But it was one that was still. It was kind of like the Lord of the Rings or the Harry Potter series of its time.
Right.
And I'd heard of it, and I knew it was a big deal that many people loved and so forth. But it had been out of print forever, right? Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s or 40s. I finally found a copy in a used bookstore. It's like, finally, I'm going to get to read this classic. And I start reading it, and it was one of the things, an important plot point of this story.
Mm-hmm.
The hero is a member of this group. Keep in mind this was written in 46, so the fact this plot is now really old hat and cliched. It wasn't
so
quite
at the time,
old hat
right?
and cliched back then. This guy is the member of this sort of mutants who are oppressed kind of thing. Not exactly, but that's what Slan are,
Okay.
or humans that have these extra talents, and they have to hide.
Right.
And he gets discovered, it gets exposed, and he's now a fugitive on the run. And an important plot point in his on the run is when he manages to get off the commuter train, basically,
Mm-hmm.
in what is essentially a suburb in the middle of a weekday.
Mm-hmm.
And he's able to, even though he gets seen, he's able to he is not caught, because the only people who are in the neighborhood during the workday, of course, are housewives, and they are armed only with brooms and mops.
Oh
So
God.
they can't. This is an important plot point of the novel, right? This is how he escapes capture at one point, is because, and it's like, oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God.
Yep. I, I
You know,
I think it's a funny point that just that technology we can imagine, but actual social change, very difficult to imagine. And I'm not saying that it's not going to be the same thing in 75 years.
yeah.
I'm sure it's going to be the same thing. I'm sure
Oh,
there's going to be people saying, "Look at them! They couldn't even predict thought wave generators,"
yep.
or something.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and you brought it up, but I think it's another good point too. I actually heard somebody once mock Empire Strikes Back for saying, "Oh, really? They're related. That's original." Like, no, 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 no. You don't understand. 1980. That was so shocking because nobody did that. Not
Mm-hmm.
nobody, but very few people did the, "Oh, we are related to the antagonist." It was rare at the time.
Yes.
You can't mock the first person who did it because it's become popular now. No, doesn't work that way.
Yep. Yeah, there was like a review I read once of Theodore Sturgeon's More Than Human, which was actually not a novel. It was 3 or 4 novellas, I forget now, that were published originally separately.
Yeah.
And then later were combined. I mean, they were sequels to each other.
Right.
But one time I read a review of it where somebody says, "This guy's just totally ripping off the X-Men," and I was like,
Oh.
"You realize he wrote this from the first one in 1949, and the fourth one in 1956, and the X-Men were created in the mid 60s."
Yep. Yep.
It's
So beware, kids. You're going to have stuff where you're just going to come up and, no, they did that in Terminator long before you ever thought of. It's going to happen.
yes,
It's
yes,
going to happen.
yes.
It's the fiction equivalent of Get Off My Lawn.
Yes.
And it will happen to you. I guarantee it.
You'll
The
find
mother's,
yourself saying that.
as a comedian once said, mothers' curses work, where they say, "I hope you have children that are one day act just like you." That works. But here's an equally good one. You too will be complaining about modern fiction that it's ripping off what you knew as a kid.
Yep. Yes, indeed. And music.
Yes, that's very true.
The
Yep.
same way. And move. Yep. All of that.
Oh, yeah. Well, a question that I ask in each of my interviews, in all of My Little Pony, what would you say is one line or scene that defines you as a brony?
Ooh. Defines me.
Yeah.
Oh God, that one's hard.
Thank you.
Because I'm so boring. And so little of My Little Pony is boring. Okay.
You could quote
Defines.
Maud if you'd like.
Um. Actually no. I actually do know, but I know what I think describes me, and that is,
Sure.
I didn't learn anything at all. I was right all along. That is also my favorite episode.
That's an incredibly good one. Yep. Yeah. I love how the writers were speaking of that, and they said, often we have to come up with a lesson at the end after we've done the whole episode, and this time we just couldn't think of anything until somebody said, why don't we just have her say that? Like, yeah, okay, sure, yeah, nobody learned anything.
Well, no, it is an important lesson sometimes I think, to remind yourself that, you often know what you should do.
Yeah.
You often know what the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Doesn't have to be a learning experience all the time. You already knew that. Just had to remember.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if somebody is interested in the Taipan omnibuy, is that plural? Omnibuy? Must be.
Probably.
Okay.
We'll
Where can they find them?
They should still be available at Rabbit Valley Comics.
Okay.
And you could also go to taipanproject.org.
Okay. Is there a dash there, or is there one word?
It's one word, all one word. TAIPANPROJECT.org.
Gotcha.
And order them directly from us. They should also be available from Second Ed Mail Order, even though the name is Second Ed Mail Order, they are an online vendor.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, if we pay extra, can we get one that's been typed out personally by you? I'm sorry.
I suppose. I'm not sure typed on. I wouldn't want to try to fit one of those into my typewriters. I do have a typewriter collection. We didn't get into that. That's scary. I know. But we have occasionally. It's been a while. We have occasionally sold autographed ones.
Oh, okay.
But
can we have one that has like 20 blind bag ponies glued to it?
You don't want to glue them to it.
I know.
I don't know if I can't. Well, actually, I guess I can't. No, I was starting to say, can I sell blind bag? We don't have them in the catalog, but no, well, of course, I've got a business license. Of course, I can sell them online if I wanted to. I just think of it. I just sell the magazines there.
Yeah. Of course, I'm joking, but yes. So, everybody, today we have been speaking with Fontfolly. Follow on Twitter. Check out the Taipan group and purchase if you'd like to read some. I suppose at this point it is classic science fiction.
It's at least old science fiction.
Get it, read it in 20 or 30 years and see what we couldn't predict. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for coming by and speaking with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Good. Everyone, this is Osaka Jack with Into the Spotlight on Everfree Network. We'll catch you next time.